when we talked about the season, we had a sense of what the story was going to be and the different looks that we wanted to get, and we knew that we were going to be starting in a fairly urban environment and then gradually getting out and moving into a more rural environment. And we also wanted to have some flavor of what we thought of as the outback, this sort of idea of, kind of being out in the middle of nowhere, which really only looks the way that it looks in Australia. And so Mimi Leader, who is basically the unsung visual hero of The Leftovers, directs so many of our episodes, basically runs the production in New York, and she ran it in Texas. She basically brought a team down with Tom Spezialy, who's another executive producer on the show. While we continued working in the writer's room, they came down and they were the advanced team. And I think that they traveled, they did Sydney, they did Melbourne, they did Adelaide, just in terms of getting a sense of what the different looks would be available, what the stages were like, what the crew base was going to be. And I think that I started hearing, as soon as they got to Melbourne, that Melbourne was really going to be the place that felt like it was going to fit best with the show that we had designed. I wouldn't say that everything happened exactly the way that we expected, but I think Melbourne did a great job of sort of explaining this is what it's going to be like to shoot here between the months of June and September. We did have a lot of rain. My understanding is that it was a record amount of rainfall, and in the history of recorded history, never has more rain fallen in this period of time than when we were there shooting. So that was surprising, but fortunately, we had designed a season of television that was around a character believing that a biblical flood was about to happen, and so maybe everything happens for a reason. So. But it was definitely difficult to learn on occasion that we had to build roads in order to get to sets. We built a house out in the middle of nowhere in the Yuyangs, and we did not build that house to withstand torrential downpours. So that was surprising. But when we look at the season and what we were able to capture on film, it was kind of wonderful too. I'm not sure whether it was a coincidence or not, because Gene Kelly, another great unsung hero of The Leftovers, basically our physical producer who has to take these insane things that we put on the page and help figure out how we're actually going to be able to execute them. He was also the producer on The Pacific, so he had pre-existing relationships with the crew base in Melbourne, but also sort of understood, like, you can just go 45 minutes out of the city and get this amazing look. So he knew about the Yuyangs, and I think that that might be one of the reasons we ended up there. Obviously, finding great sound stages is important, just in terms of their size, their versatility, and more importantly, like, centrality of location. I think that a lot of our actors were spread all over Melbourne, and it was important for us to have a place that everybody could get to quickly and safely. And it was also nice to ride on the Big I whenever they wanted to. So it's a first-rate facility. Obviously, it feels very new, and it's not like worn down. And it was just a great place to work. What I would say about the Australian crew was that they have this unique blend of not taking themselves seriously, but taking the work incredibly seriously. And I feel, and they also work with great speed. One of the things about shooting in the States is you can go hours and hours and hours overtime into the wee hours of the morning and nobody seems to care. I think that, when you show up in Australia, things really move at a very rapid clip. Not that you're phoning it in or not getting what you want, but everybody kind of wants to get home and have a life, which was it was great for us as American filmmakers to basically match that speed versus bringing slowing down theirs. And I feel like it really infused the work with a great sense of energy. And it's nice to not shoot until 3 in the morning every night. I think that the local film office was incredibly helpful. Again, I think that Mimi and Tom Spezialy and Gene came down early. They developed that relationship months and months and months before we started shooting here, and then we started shooting this final season in Texas, and and then shut down for a full month just so that we could make sure that we understood what the culture was, both artistically and professionally in Melbourne, and every resource that we needed was basically afforded us by Film Victoria. We never heard no, and I think that we learned a lot about how to optimize the incredible sort of palette and spectrum that was available to us in this very narrow range of miles. I never cease to be amazed by the fact that we were based out of Melbourne, but we were able to get so many unique looks. It really feels like an epic show. And when you look at a show like Game of Thrones, which has to shoot in 5 different countries in order to get that feel, and we were just basically based out of Melbourne, I'm really just sort of amazed by the versatility. Between the first and second season of The Leftovers, we watched a number of films, but the ones that had the most impact were Picnic at Hanging Rock and The Last Wave, both Peter Weir films, and then this film Wake in Fright, which I had never seen before that time, and they presented this this version of Australia, obviously from a slightly different era, not too far in the past, but there was a timeless quality and a magical quality and a strangeness and a sense of humor, and it felt like we wanted to tell a story about the end of the world, and Australia just felt like it was the end of the world, both literally and figuratively, but not in this depressing way. It had this kind of tremendous, exciting energy around it, and mystery too. I think that it felt like it was very primal and very ancient, but it also felt like it was very futuristic in this sort of strange way. And it was like, I just want to capture some of that energy. So maybe if we set the final season of The Leftovers there, we'll tap into that sort of unique vein of, I close my eyes, I hear a didgeridoo. I don't know if it's being played thousands of years ago or this morning, and there's something kind of wonderful about that. We always wanted to shoot Australia for Australia, and what's amazing to me is I'd never been to Australia before this show. I really wrote the show just so I could have an excuse to go, but it does feel like it's very, very, very far away from here. And if you talk to Australians and ask them if they've ever visited the States, they're much more likely to say yes, but very few people who live in the States have ever taken the journey to Australia, and I hopefully the show will inspire them to do so, because it's really unlike any other place that I've ever been, and I can't wait to go back. The experience of working with Film Victoria was one of a kind, but I hope to repeat it many, many more times in my career.